Elizabeth Ratliff was a close friend of Michael Peterson and his first wife. When she died mysteriously, Michael had taken in her 2 daughters, though never officially adopted them. After the death of Kathleen, Elizabeth's death began to raise suspicions. In 1985, Elizabeth was living in Germany with Michael and his first wife Patricia. She was found dead at the foot of a staircase with injuries to the head and surrounded by a pool of blood. Michael was the last person to see her alive. Her death had been investigated by both the German police and the US military police. At that time, her death was labeled as an accident. When the trial for Kathleen's death began, a re-examination of Elizabeth's death was authorized. Elizabeth's body was exhumed from its Texas resting place and re-evaluated. After the second autopsy was performed, her death was officially changed from accident to homicide. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head. As the trial continued, mounting evidence was presented against Michael. The defense maintained that they were a very happy couple, which was confirmed by many of Peterson's friends, family, and neighbors. They argued that Michael would have no incentive to kill his wife. The prosecution said otherwise. It was found that the couple was experiencing a heavy debt. In addition to the $143,000 in credit card debt, the couple was struggling with Michael's sons, and they were desperately in need of financial assistance. Michael had earned no income for an extended time since the release of his last book, and the company that Kathleen was employed was struggling with massive layoffs. Kathleen had a life insurance policy that would pay out $1.4 million in the event of an accident. This was cited as a possible motive. Those who defend Michael's innocence have many theories on what really happened that night, but nothing is as interesting as the owl theory.
What I know for sure is that Michael Peterson did not beat Kathleen Peterson to death in that stairway. It didn't happen.
The owl theory is a ridiculous theory. When you first hear it, you really have to get into the evidence in order to understand that it was actually possible for an owl to do this.
Nobody thought of an owl at that time. Everybody just rushed to judgment and thought that this was a murder.
Somewhere during the trial, after the autopsy pictures were shown, that Larry thought that the wounds on Kathleen Peterson's head looked very much like bird tracks.
The only real difference, if you will, between our theory at trial and the owl theory is the initial infliction of the wounds.
The expert witness who said that it was blunt force trauma couldn't explain how many blows to the head would be made by this trident form. And he said, well, I really don't know. It's a very unusual shape. And that's because it wasn't blunt force trauma. It was made by the owl.
When you look at the wounds on Kathleen's head, the theory that a raptor caused those wounds is pretty persuasive.
And in this instance, when it hit Mrs. Peterson, she reached up and all of a sudden she is entangled with this wild bird of prey, a barred owl.
It should be mentioned that barred owls are known to owl experts to attack people out of the blue, unprovoked, with no warning. So the fact that Kathleen lived in a place where these owls are prevalent and she got whacked in the head by one is not far out of the ordinary.
One of the key pieces of evidence was the micro feathers in Kathleen's hands. She had pulled out her hair in order to get the owl loose.
She had 38 hairs in one hand and 25 in the other. All of the hairs were Mrs. Peterson's hairs. What they didn't realize at that time, though, was that on her hairs were microscopic feathers. These owls are one of the only species of birds of prey that have these feathers. They go all the way down their legs to the talons, and it's the talons that we say caused the lacerations which caused her to bleed to death.
It never crossed my mind until Larry Pollard came to my office a day or two before the closing when I couldn't do anything with it.
I think that every single piece of evidence in the case is much more credibly explained by the owl theory than by a murder theory.
Whether an owl swooped down that night when she was outside, I don't know, but it's certainly plausible. But if we had retried it, would that have been something I would have been seriously investigating? Absolutely.
Hope you guys enjoyed the series. If you did, make sure you hit that subscribe button. See you again next week.